She rejected him at the altar, but when she discovered he was a disguised millionaire, the silence in the church was deafening. Jessica looked at Michael with an expression mixing doubt and despair, while her delicate veil swayed in the breeze coming through the open doors of the sanctuary. "I can't," she whispered, her voice echoing through the sacred space filled with family and friends waiting anxiously. Michael felt as if the world had stopped. His hands trembled slightly as he held the paper with the vows he had written so lovingly for weeks. Father Richard, a grey-haired man who had known both families for years, stood motionless, unsure how to react to the unexpected situation. "Jessica, what's happening?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse with restrained emotion. She looked away, unable to meet the brown eyes of the man she loved but couldn't accept as her life partner. For months, the pressure from her family had loomed over their relationship like a shadow. The constant comparisons to her friends who had married financially successful men hammered at her mind. "I need time to think," Jessica murmured slowly, removing the veil from her head. The murmurs in the church started quietly, but soon grew into an uncomfortable buzz. Michael glanced at the guests, seeing the disappointment on his mother's face. Mrs. Ruth, a simple woman who had worked double shifts for years to afford this ceremony. He also caught the satisfied look of Richard, Jessica's father, a construction businessman who had never hidden his disapproval of their relationship. "Jessica, please, let's talk," Michael begged, reaching out to her. But the young woman was already stepping back, clutching the hem of the wedding dress that had cost 3 months of Michael's salary as a mechanic. She had insisted on that specific dress, and he had agreed to go into debt to fulfill her dream, even though he knew he couldn't afford it. "I'm sorry, Michael. I really am," she said, before turning and running down the church's central aisle. The sound of Jessica's high heels on the marble floor echoed like gunshots in Michael's heart. He stood frozen at the altar, watching the woman he loved disappear through the main doors, taking all his dreams of happiness with her. Mrs. Ruth rose from the front row and walked to her son. Her eyes were watery, but she tried to maintain her composure in front of everyone. "My son, let's go home," she said, gently touching Michael's arm. "No, Mum, I need to understand what just happened," he replied, still in shock. Richard approached them with firm steps. He was a tall, imposing man, wearing an expensive suit that contrasted with Mrs. Ruth's simple attire. "Son, maybe it's for the best," Richard said, without a hint of embarrassment. "My daughter deserves someone who can give her the future she dreams of." Michael felt anger rise in his chest, but he took a deep breath. His mother had taught him that dignity mattered more than any confrontation. "Mr. Richard, I love your daughter more than my own life," Michael said, staring straight into the older man's eyes. "Love doesn't pay the bills, boy," Richard retorted, adjusting his expensive tie. "Jessica was raised in comfort. She can't live in a rented house in the suburbs depending on a mechanic's salary." Richard's words struck Michael like daggers. It was true. He couldn't give Jessica the lifestyle she was used to, at least not yet. But he had plans, dreams of professional growth and building a solid future with her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us tremendously as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Mrs. Ruth held her son's arm firmly, sensing he was about to do something he might regret. "Michael, let's leave," she insisted. Father Richard, who had silently observed the entire argument, finally spoke up. "I think it's best if everyone calms down," he said in the measured tone of someone who had witnessed many difficult situations over his years in the priesthood. "This is neither the time nor the place for this conversation." Michael glanced once more toward the church door, secretly hoping Jessica would return. That all of this was just pre-wedding nerves, something many brides experienced. But the door remained empty, just like the hollow ache in his chest. "You're right, Father," Michael said, finally stepping away from the altar. "Let's go, Mom." As they walked down the central aisle, Michael could feel the pitying and curious stares of the guests. Some whispered among themselves, others shook their heads in disapproval. The humiliation was nearly unbearable, but he kept his head held high. Outside the church, they found Jessica sitting on a wooden bench beneath a large tree. She had taken off her shoes and was crying silently, clutching her veil in her hands. When she saw Michael, her sobs grew louder. "Michael, I didn't want it to be like this," she said without looking up. He approached slowly, as if afraid she might run away again. "Then why was it, Jessica? What changed since yesterday, when you said you could hardly wait to be my wife?" Jessica finally met his gaze. Her green eyes were swollen from crying, and her makeup had smudged, leaving dark streaks on her cheeks. "I got scared, Michael. Scared I couldn't live with less. Scared of disappointing my family. Scared I'd regret it someday and end up hating you for it." Her words cut deeper than any insult. Michael felt she had questioned not just his ability to provide for her, but also the love they shared. "Do you really think our love isn't strong enough to overcome financial struggles?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know, Michael, I really don't," Jessica replied, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Richard had followed the couple and was watching the conversation from a respectful distance, but Michael could feel his presence like a threatening shadow. "Sweetheart, it's time we went home," Richard said, stepping closer. "Dad, please, just give me a few more minutes," Jessica pleaded. "There's nothing left to discuss," Richard insisted. "You made the right choice. Now you need to be strong and move forward." Michael looked at Richard with a mix of sorrow and anger. This man had managed to destroy their 3-year relationship with his constant influence and veiled criticisms. "Mr. Richard, you never gave me a real chance," Michael said. "From day one, you decided I wasn't good enough for your daughter. And you're not," Richard replied without hesitation. "My daughter deserves security, comfort, a guaranteed future, not adventures and uncertainty." Mrs. Ruth, who had stayed quiet until then, stepped closer to the group. "Mr. Richard," she said with the dignity only hard-working mothers possess, "my son is honest, hard-working, and truly loves your daughter. Maybe that's worth more than money." Richard looked at Mrs. Ruth with disdain. "Mom, with all due respect, life isn't a fairy tale. Love doesn't put food on the table or a roof over your head. Love makes you work twice as hard to get those things," Mrs. Ruth shot back, unshaken. Jessica watched the argument between her family and Michael's, feeling more lost with every word exchanged. She knew her decision had deeply hurt the man she loved, but she also couldn't ignore the worries that had been weighing on her mind for weeks. "Michael," she said, standing up from the bench, "I need time to think about all this. I need to figure out what I really want from life." "And how much time do you need?" asked Michael, a hint of desperation in his voice. "I don't know. Maybe it's best if we take some time apart." Jessica's suggestion hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He had hoped that after talking, they could find a solution to her fears. He hadn't imagined she would suggest a separation. "Jessica, we can work through this together," he pleaded. "We've always solved our problems by talking. This time is different, Michael. This time, it's about our entire future." Richard placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, as if to shield her from more pain. "Come on, Jessica. You need to rest and think clearly." Michael watched Jessica walk away with her father, still carrying the wedding dress that should have been a symbol of their union. He felt like he was losing not just the woman he loved, but all the plans they had made together. "Mom," he said, turning to Mrs. Ruth, "what do I do now?" Mrs. Ruth hugged her son, feeling all the pain he was going through. "Now you go home, take off that nice suit, and decide if she's really worth fighting for, or if it's time to move on." Michael nodded, but he already knew the answer in his heart. He would fight for Jessica, even if it meant facing Richard and every obstacle in his way. 3 days had passed since the wedding that never happened. Michael had tried calling Jessica several times, but she never answered. His messages went unanswered. Anxiety consumed his days and nights. At the garage where he worked in Williamsburg, New York City, Michael tried to focus on the cars he needed to fix, but his mind kept drifting back to Jessica. His co-worker, Robert, a middle-aged man with over 20 years of experience as a mechanic, noticed his friend's distress. "Michael, you can't even tighten a bolt right," Robert said, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. Why don't you just go talk to her in person? I tried, Robert. I went to her house yesterday, but Richard said she didn't want to see me. And you believed that man? Robert asked, raising an eyebrow. Come on, you've known Jessica for 3 years. She's never been one to shy away from a tough conversation. Michael stopped what he was doing and looked at his friend. Robert was right. Jessica had always been straightforward with her opinions, even when they disagreed. Her behavior these past few days didn't match her personality. Maybe her father is keeping her from talking to me, Michael murmured. Or maybe she's just confused and needs a little push to make the right decision, Robert suggested. That afternoon after work, Michael decided to wait for Jessica, outside the women's clothing store where she worked as a sales associate. It was an elegant shop in the Upper East Side, frequented by high society women from New York City. When Jessica left work at 6, she found Michael leaning against his old motorcycle on the sidewalk in front of the store. She hesitated for a moment, glancing around to see if anyone she knew was watching. "Michael, what are you doing here?" she asked, stepping closer cautiously. "We need to talk, Jessica. For real this time, with no one interfering." She looked around again, as if afraid of being seen talking to him. "I can't, Michael. My dad is coming to pick me up." "Then let's grab a quick coffee right there on the corner, 5 minutes. Jessica hesitated. She knew meeting Michael alone would go against her father's wishes, but she also missed him in a way that was eating away at her peace of mind. 5 minutes, she finally agreed. They walked to a small coffee shop on the corner of the street. It was a simple place, very different from the expensive restaurants Jessica was used to going to with her family. Michael ordered 2 coffees, and they sat at a table near the window. "Jessica, I need to understand what really happened at the church," Michael said, looking straight into her eyes. "I already explained, Michael. I got scared I couldn't live with the financial limitations we'd have. But that was never a problem before. For the last 3 years, you always said you didn't care about those things." Jessica looked down at her coffee, avoiding Michael's gaze. "Things changed, Michael. I grew up, started thinking about the future more practically. Or someone convinced you I wouldn't be a good husband," Michael said, a hint of irritation in his voice. "No one convinced me of anything," Jessica defended, but her voice lacked conviction. "Jessica, we've known each other for 3 years. I can tell when someone's influencing you." She sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the situation. "Michael, even if my dad has opinions about our relationship, the final decision is mine, and I don't feel ready to marry someone who can't offer me financial security." "And what do you consider financial security?" Michael asked, trying to stay calm. "A home of my own, a nice car, the chance to travel, to buy clothes without saving for months." Michael felt Jessica's words revealed a side of her he didn't fully know. In their 3 years together, she had never shown such concern for material things. "Since when are those things more important than the love we have for each other?" he asked. "Michael, you don't understand," Jessica said, frustrated. "You've never had to give up anything in life. You've always lived simply, so it's easy for you to say money doesn't matter." "I've never had to give up anything," Michael repeated, disbelieving. "Jessica, I've worked since I was 14 to help my mom. I've never bought new clothes without checking if there'd be enough left for food. How can you say I don't know what it means to sacrifice?" Jessica realized she'd been unfair, but pride kept her from admitting it. "It's different, Michael. You're used to it, I'm not. So you'd rather leave me than adjust to a simpler life?" Before Jessica could answer, Richard appeared at the coffee shop door. His face was red with anger when he saw his daughter talking to Michael. "Jessica, we're leaving now," he ordered, stepping toward the table. "Dad, I don't care what you were doing," Richard interrupted. "You promised you wouldn't talk to him anymore." Michael stood up, sensing the tension in the air. "Mr. Richard, we were just talking." "Boy, don't you get the message?" Richard said, pointing a finger at Michael. "My daughter wants nothing to do with you. Stop chasing her." "I'm not chasing anyone," Michael replied, trying to stay composed. "I'm trying to talk to the woman I love." "The woman you loved," Richard corrected, "because now she's free to find someone who truly deserves her." Jessica stayed seated, watching the argument between her father and Michael. She knew she should defend Michael from the unfair accusations, but she felt paralyzed by the conflict between her feelings and her family's pressure. "Jessica," said Michael, ignoring Richard and addressing her directly, "do you really not want to try anymore?" She looked at her father, then at Michael, and felt she was being forced to choose between two important parts of her life. "Michael, I think it's best if you leave," she said softly. Jessica's response hit Michael like a punch. He had hoped she would at least defend their right to talk. "Fine," he said, grabbing his wallet to pay for the coffee, "but know that I won't give up on you easily." "You'll have to," said Richard, stepping between Michael and Jessica, "because my daughter will marry someone who can give her the future she deserves." Michael looked at Jessica one last time, hoping she would contradict her father. But she remained silent, looking down. "Goodbye, Jessica," he said, walking out of the cafe. When Michael left, Richard sat in the chair he had vacated. "Sweetheart, you did the right thing," he said, touching Jessica's hand. "I know it's hard now, but you'll thank me in the future." Jessica nodded mechanically, but she felt she had lost something very important. The genuine love Michael had shown her was rare, and deep down she knew it. "Dad, are you sure we're doing the right thing?" she asked, doubt in her voice. "Absolutely," Richard replied without hesitation. "You're young and beautiful, my dear. You can find a successful man who will give you everything you dream of." Jessica didn't answer, but the emptiness in her chest seemed to grow with each passing day. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting at the cafe. Michael had tried to accept that the relationship was over, but he couldn't reconcile himself to the idea that 3 years of true love could be destroyed by financial prejudice. At the garage, Robert noticed his friend's increasingly despondent state. "Michael, you're losing weight," Robert said during their lunch break. "When was the last time you ate a full meal?" "I haven't had much of an appetite lately," Michael replied, picking absently at a sandwich. "Man, you can't destroy yourself over a woman. If she can't see your worth, that's her problem." Michael knew Robert was trying to help, but the words did little to ease his pain. "Robert, I'm sure Jessica loves me. The problem is her father's influence." "Then prove to her you can give her the future she wants," Robert suggested. "How? I earn a mechanic's salary. I can't compete with the businessman's sons Richard wants her to meet." Robert thought for a moment. "Michael, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Why have you never told me about your family? In 2 years working together, you've never mentioned your father, your grandparents, nothing except your mother." Michael shifted uncomfortably. There were parts of his life he preferred to keep private, even with close friends. "There's not much to tell, Robert. My father left when I was a kid. I grew up with just my mom." "And your paternal grandparents? Have you ever tried to find them?" "Why would I? If they cared about me, they would have shown up long ago." Robert nodded, respecting his friend's privacy, but he couldn't shake the feeling there was more to the story. That afternoon, as Michael worked on servicing an imported car, an elegant woman walked into the garage. Her refined appearance stood out against the modest surroundings. She wore an expensive dress and understated but valuable jewelry. "Good afternoon," she said, glancing around with slight discomfort. "I'm looking for Michael Collins." Robert pointed to Michael, who had his head under the hood of a car. "There, Michael," called Robert. "There's a lady here who wants to speak with you." Michael stepped out from under the hood, wiping his hands on a rag. When he saw the woman, he was surprised. He didn't know her, but it was obvious she belonged to a very different social class than his. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "My name is Eleanor Thompson," she said, extending her hand politely. "I'd like to speak with you privately, if possible." Michael glanced at Robert, who shrugged, equally curious about the situation. "Of course, Mrs. Eleanor, we can talk in the office." They headed to a small room at the back of the garage that served as an office. Michael offered Eleanor a chair and sat behind the simple desk. "Mr. Michael, I came here because I heard about what happened at your wedding," Eleanor said, getting straight to the point. Michael was stunned. He had no idea how this stranger knew about his personal life. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but how did you find out about that?" "Jessica works at my friend Catherine's store. She told me about the situation." Michael felt a tightness in his chest at the mention of Jessica's name. "And what does this have to do with you?" Eleanor hesitated for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Michael, may I ask you a few questions about your family?" "I don't understand where you're going with this." What was your father's full name? Michael grew even more confused. He saw no connection between his family history and this woman's presence in his garage. David Michael Thompson Roberts, he answered hesitantly. Eleanor's eyes widened as if she'd just confirmed a long-held suspicion. And do you know why he abandoned you and your mother? Mrs. Eleanor, with all due respect, I don't see why I should discuss my personal life with a stranger. Eleanor took a deep breath, preparing to reveal something that would change Michael's life forever. Michael, I'm your paternal grandmother. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. That's impossible, he finally said. My father told me he had no family. Your father lied, Michael. He did have a family, one that loved him and never stopped searching for you. Michael stood up, feeling dizzy from the revelation. You're lying. Why show up only now? Because we only just found you, Eleanor replied, tears in her eyes. Your father changed his name when he ran away from home. It took years for us to discover that Michael Collins was actually David Michael Thompson Roberts. Why? Did my father run away? Michael asked, still in shock. Because he was young and proud, he'd fought with your grandfather about his future plans. When he found out your mother was pregnant, he was too afraid to come home and face the family. Michael sat back down, trying to process everything. And where is he now? Eleanor lowered her gaze, visibly emotional. Your father passed away 5 years ago, Michael. He had a heart condition. Until the end, he regretted abandoning you and your mother. The news about his father left Michael with a mix of sadness and anger. Sadness for never having the chance to truly know him, and anger for being left behind for so many years. Why are you telling me this now? He asked. Because you're my grandson, Michael, my only grandson, and because I know you're going through a hard time. You know about Jessica. I know she rejected you over money, and I know you're hurting because of it. Michael laughed bitterly. So, you came here to comfort me. I came here to tell you the truth about who you really are, Eleanor said firmly. And who am I then? Eleanor looked straight into Michael's eyes. You're the heir to one of the largest logistics companies in New York State. You're a millionaire, Michael, and you don't even know it. Michael froze. Eleanor's words echoed in his mind like part of a surreal dream. This is crazy, he murmured. If I were heir to anything, why would I be working as a mechanic? Because you never knew your true origins, Eleanor explained. When your father ran away, he gave up everything, but the inheritance was always rightfully yours. Michael stood up again, pacing back and forth in the small office. Mrs. Eleanor, even if this were true, what do you expect me to do with this information? Claim your place in the family and the company, she replied simply. And why would I do that? Because it's your right, and because you can use this position to win over the woman you love. The mention of Jessica made Michael stop walking. You think I should use money to win Jessica over? I think you should show her you can offer the future she wants, said Eleanor. Sometimes people need security to feel free to love. Michael fell silent, thinking about all the implications of this revelation. And if I don't want to claim this inheritance? He asked. Then the company will continue to be managed by the board until you change your mind, Eleanor replied. But Michael, this is your chance to have everything you've ever dreamed of. I never dreamed of money, said Michael. I just wanted a simple life with Jessica. And now you can have both, Eleanor insisted. Michael looked through the grimy office window at the busy street in the neighborhood where he'd worked for 2 years. That was his reality, the life he knew. The idea that he could be heir to a fortune seemed completely unreal. Mrs. Eleanor, I need time to think about all this, he said finally. Of course, Eleanor agreed, rising from her chair. But don't take too long, Michael. Your life could change completely. She handed Michael an elegant business card with her name and phone number. When you're ready to learn the full truth about your family, call me. After Eleanor left the garage, Michael stood alone in the office, staring at the card in his hands. Robert knocked on the door and walked in. Dude, who was that woman? She looked loaded. Robert, would you believe me if I told you she claims to be my grandmother? Your grandmother. But you said you didn't know your father's family? Yeah, apparently there's a lot about my family I didn't know. Robert sat in the chair Eleanor had occupied. So what did she want? Michael hesitated before answering. The story was so surreal he was struggling to believe it himself. She said, "I'm the heir to a logistics company, that I'm a millionaire." Robert stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "Michael, are you messing with me?" "I wish I were," Michael replied, sinking heavily into his chair. "And you believe her?" "I don't know what to believe, Robert, but she knew my father's full name, details about my life that only family would know." Robert grew thoughtful for a moment. "If it's true, this changes everything with Jessica." "That's what she said. But do I really want to win Jessica over with money?" "Michael, if the money is rightfully yours, it's not using money to win her over. It's just showing her who you really are." "But is that really who I am?" Michael asked, looking at his grease-stained hands. "Or am I Michael Collins, the mechanic who lives in the suburbs with his mom?" "Man, you can be both," said Robert. "Rich or poor, you're still the same honest, hard-working guy I know." Michael tucked Eleanor's card into his shirt pocket. He knew that sooner or later he would have to find out if she was telling the truth. That night, Michael came home earlier than usual. He found Mrs. Ruth preparing dinner in the small kitchen of their modest home in the Park Slope neighborhood. She immediately noticed her son was troubled. "Michael, did something happen?" she asked, drying her hands on her apron. "Mom, I need to ask you some questions about my father." Mrs. Ruth tensed up. It was a subject they rarely discussed, as it always brought pain to both of them. "What do you want to know, son? Are you sure he didn't have any family? Why are you asking that?" Michael told his mother about Eleanor's visit to the auto shop. As he recounted the conversation, he saw Mrs. Ruth's face grow paler. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, concerned. Mrs. Ruth sat heavily on the kitchen chair. "Michael, I always knew your father came from a wealthy family." "What do you mean?" "The clothes he wore when we met, the places he took me to for dinner. Those weren't things a poor man could afford." Michael sat in the chair next to his mother. "And why did you never tell me this?" "Because when you were born, he said he had completely cut ties with his family. He said they would never accept us and that it was better to start our lives from scratch." "But he abandoned me 2 years later." "Yes," Mrs. Ruth agreed sadly. "I think the pressure of supporting a family without being able to rely on his family's money was too much for him." Michael fell silent, processing the information. "Mum, do you think I should look for this Eleanor?" Mrs. Ruth held her son's hand. "Michael, you're a grown man. You can make your own decisions, but remember, money can solve some problems, but it can also create others." "Are you thinking about Jessica?" "I'm thinking about you," Mrs. Ruth replied. "If this woman is telling the truth, your life will change completely. Are you ready for that?" Michael wasn't sure if he was ready for any change. His simple life, though limited, was the only one he knew. "Mom, what if I use this money to win Jessica back and find out she only wants me because of the inheritance? Then you'll know you made the right choice by walking away from her," Mrs. Ruth answered wisely. "And if she really loves me, regardless of the money, then you'll both figure that out together." Michael spent the whole night thinking about his conversation with Eleanor. The next morning, he decided to call the number on the card. "Hello, Mrs. Eleanor, this is Michael." "Michael, I'm so glad you called. Have you decided if you want to learn more about your inheritance?" "Yes, Mum, but I have one condition." "What is it?" "I want concrete proof that you're really my grandmother and that this inheritance exists." "Of course," Eleanor agreed. "How about we meet this afternoon at the company's office? I can show you all the documents." "All right, what's the address?" Eleanor gave him the address of a corporate building in the Wall Street area, one of the most upscale parts of New York City. Michael wrote it down and promised to be there at 2 in the afternoon. Before the meeting, Michael asked for time off from the auto shop. Robert supported him, curious to see how this story would end. "Michael, no matter what you find out today, you'll always have a job here," Robert said. "Thank you, Robert. That means a lot to me." Michael took his old motorcycle and headed to the address Eleanor had given him. When he arrived at the building, he was struck by its size and elegance. It was a glass and steel skyscraper, unlike anywhere he'd ever been before. At the reception, a polished secretary greeted him. "Good afternoon. I'm here to see Mrs. Eleanor Thompson." "Mr. Michael." she asked with a professional smile. Mrs. Eleanor is waiting for you. 20th floor, room 2010. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. In the elevator, Michael studied his reflection in the polished mirror. His simple clothes stood in stark contrast to the sophisticated surroundings. He felt like a fish out of water. When he reached room 2010, he found Eleanor waiting behind an enormous desk in an office that looked more like a luxury apartment. The windows offered a panoramic view of New York City. Michael, I'm glad you came, said Eleanor, standing to greet him. Mrs. Eleanor, this place is incredible. This is the presidential office of Thompson Logistics, she explained, and soon it could be your office. Michael glanced around, trying to picture himself working in a place like this. You said you had proof to show me. I do, said Eleanor, opening a folder on the desk. Here's your father's birth certificate, David Michael Thompson Roberts. And here's your grandfather's will, which clearly states that the inheritance should go to his children and, in their absence, to his grandchildren. Michael examined the documents. Everything seemed legitimate, but he still had doubts. How can I be sure these documents are real? Eleanor smiled and picked up the phone. Dr. William, could you come to my office, please? Bring the test results. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit entered the room. Michael, this is Dr. William, our family attorney, Eleanor introduced. Mr. Michael, said Dr. William, extending his hand. When Mrs. Eleanor discovered where you were, we arranged a DNA test using material you'd left at the auto shop. Michael was stunned. You ran a DNA test without my knowledge. A private investigator obtained a hair sample from a comb at the shop, Dr. William explained. I know it's not the ideal procedure, but Mrs. Eleanor wanted to be certain before reaching out to you. And what was the result? Dr. William handed Michael a sealed envelope. Open it yourself. Michael tore open the envelope with trembling hands. The results confirmed with 99.9% certainty that Eleanor Thompson was his paternal grandmother. This means, Michael began. It means you're my grandson, said Eleanor, her eyes glistening. And it means you're the rightful heir to a fortune worth over $50 million. Michael sank heavily into a chair, dizzy from the revelation. 50 million? The company is worth far more than that, Dr. William clarified. But your personal share of the inheritance, including bank accounts, investments, and properties, amounts to that sum. Michael sat silent for several minutes, struggling to process the magnitude of it all. What do I need to do to claim this inheritance? He finally asked. Just sign some documents and accept your position in the company, replied Dr. William. And if I don't want to work for the company? You can hire managers to handle your affairs, Eleanor explained. But it would be good for you to at least learn the basics of how everything works. Michael stood and walked to the window, gazing down at the city below. From this height, people looked like ants, and he felt as though he were peering into a life entirely separate from his own. Mrs. Eleanor, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why did you never look for me and my mother after my father left us? Eleanor sighed deeply. Because your grandfather was a proud and stubborn man. When David ran away from home, he swore he never wanted to see him again. It was only after your grandfather passed away 8 years ago that I began searching for you. And it took 8 years to find me. David had changed his name, remember? And you moved several times over the years. It was very difficult to track you down. Michael nodded, understanding the difficulties. And now? What happens now? Now you decide whether you want to claim your true identity or keep being Michael Collins, the mechanic, said Eleanor. Can I be both? Asked Michael. Eleanor smiled. You can be whoever you want, my grandson. With 50 million in the bank, you have the freedom to make any choice. Michael thought of Jessica. He imagined the look on her face when she found out. The man she had rejected for being poor was actually a millionaire. Can I take some time to decide? Of course, agreed Eleanor. But while you decide, how about getting to know a little of your inheritance? What do you mean? How about we go see your house? Asked Eleanor with a mysterious smile. My house? but I live with my mother in Park Slope. Michael, said Dr. William, you own a mansion in Westchester, 2 apartments in the Upper East Side and a beach house in the Hamptons. Michael looked at them as if they were joking with him. Is this for real? Completely real, confirmed Eleanor. Want to see? An hour later, Michael was in the back seat of a top-of-the-line Cadillac on his way to Westchester. Eleanor had insisted he see at least one of his properties. During the ride, Michael stared out the window at the passing scenery. The difference between the neighborhood he lived in and the places they drove through was staggering. Michael, said Eleanor, can I ask you a question about this girl, Jessica? Go ahead. Do you truly love her, or are you just hurt because she rejected you? Michael thought about the question for a moment. I love her, Mrs. Eleanor. I really do, but I also feel betrayed because I thought she loved me enough to face any hardship with me. And if she finds out about your inheritance and wants to come back to you, how would you feel? Confused, admitted Michael, because I wouldn't know if she wants me for who I am or what I have. It's a complicated dilemma, agreed Eleanor. But maybe there's a way to find out the truth. How? How about we test her reaction, suggested Eleanor with a mischievous glint in her eyes. What do you have in mind? How about appearing in her life as a wealthy man and seeing how she responds? Michael grew thoughtful. The idea was tempting, but it also felt a little dishonest. Wouldn't that be lying? It would just be omitting part of the truth, said Eleanor. You really are rich, Michael. You just didn't know it yet. When they arrived at the mansion in Westchester, Michael was speechless. It was an enormous house with an elaborate garden, a pool, a tennis court, and a 6-car garage. All of this is mine, he asked as he stepped out of the car. All of it, confirmed Eleanor. Your grandfather bought this house thinking of leaving an inheritance for the future generations of the family. They entered the house, and Michael was impressed by the refined decor and expensive furniture. Everything was impeccably maintained, as if someone lived there. Who takes care of the house? We have a staff that maintains all your properties, explained Eleanor. They've worked here for years, waiting for the heir to appear. Michael walked through the spacious rooms, trying to imagine living in a place like this. It was so different from the modest home he shared with his mother. Mrs. Eleanor, can I ask you something? Of course. If I accept this inheritance, what happens to my mother? She can keep living where she is, or she can move here, or anywhere else she wants, replied Eleanor. You'll have more than enough. Money to take very good care of her. Michael felt a wave of relief. His biggest concern was making sure Mrs. Ruth was always well taken care of. And about Jessica. Do you really think I should test her feelings? Eleanor approached Michael and placed a hand on his shoulder. My grandson, you're young and have the right to know if the woman you love truly loves you back. If she spent 3 years with you thinking you were poor and rejected you at the altar because of it, you need to find out the true nature of her feelings. Michael nodded, understanding the logic behind the suggestion. How would I do that? Leave that to me, said Eleanor with a confident smile. I have some contacts who can help. 3 days later, Michael was in a high-end clothing store at Saks Fifth Avenue, being assisted by a personal shopper Eleanor had hired. It was a completely new experience for him. Mr. Michael, said the consultant, an elegant middle-aged woman, these clothes will enhance your appearance beautifully. You'll be unrecognizable. Michael looked at himself in the mirror and truly didn't recognize himself. The Italian suit, silk shirt, and leather shoes made him a completely different person. I have to admit the change is impressive, he said. And this is just the beginning, said Eleanor, who had overseen the entire transformation. Tomorrow you'll have lessons in etiquette and social behavior. Etiquette? Michael, if you're going to pass as a successful businessman, you need to know how to carry yourself in sophisticated settings, Eleanor explained. Over the next week, Michael underwent a complete transformation. He learned about wine, art, classical music, and social conversation. Eleanor had hired the best teachers to prepare him. How am I doing? Michael asked the etiquette instructor. Very well, Mr. Michael, the man replied. Your natural charm and intelligence make learning much easier. Eleanor had devised a detailed plan. Michael would be introduced as a young entrepreneur who had recently returned from studying abroad and was investing in businesses in New York City. "And how do I explain the fact that I was a mechanic?" Michael asked. "You won't explain," said Eleanor. "Your new identity doesn't include that information." "But isn't that deceiving, Jessica?" "Michael, you're discovering who you really are," Eleanor explained. The mechanic identity was just a temporary circumstance. Michael still had doubts about the morality of the plan, but his curiosity about Jessica's true feelings outweighed his hesitation. The first step would be a chance meeting at the store where Jessica worked. Eleanor had learned her schedule and planned everything down to the smallest detail. On Friday afternoon, Michael walked into the women's clothing store on the Upper East Side, wearing a $3,000 suit and driving a Lexus Eleanor had provided. He felt strange playing this role, but was determined to uncover the truth. Jessica was helping a customer when Michael entered the store. She glanced at him briefly, not recognizing him, and continued her work. Michael pretended to browse, discreetly observing Jessica. She was thinner than before, and there was a sadness in her eyes he hadn't noticed in the past. "May I help you?" another saleswoman asked. "Actually, I'd like to buy some pieces for a friend," Michael said, his voice slightly altered, using the refined tone he'd practiced. "What kind of pieces did you have in mind?" "Something elegant, sophisticated, for a young, beautiful woman." The saleswoman began showing various options, and Michael noticed Jessica paying attention to their conversation. "If you don't mind my asking that," the saleswoman said, "do you have any reference for your friend's size?" Michael subtly glanced at Jessica and gestured in her direction. "Is he about the size of that young lady over there?" The saleswoman followed Michael's gaze. "Jessica," she called, "could you come here for a moment?" Jessica approached, and Michael felt his heart race. It was the first time he had been this close to her since the day at the coffee shop. "This is Jessica," the saleswoman introduced. "Mr. David," said Michael, using his father's name. "David Thompson." Jessica greeted Michael politely, showing no sign of recognition. "Is Jessica about the same size as your friend?" asked the saleswoman. Michael looked at Jessica as if sizing her up. "Yes, very close. Maybe the young lady could try on a few pieces so I can get an idea of how they'd look." Jessica hesitated. It wasn't common for customers to make such requests, but the man seemed like an important client, and the saleswoman was signaling for her to agree. "Of course," Jessica said. "What kind of outfit are you looking for?" "Something for a business dinner," said Michael. "Elegant, but not too formal." For the next hour, Jessica tried on several outfits, and Michael watched her reactions. She seemed impressed by the quality and price of the pieces he was willing to buy. "You have excellent taste," Jessica remarked, as she tried on a particularly expensive dress. "Thank you," said Michael. "You have great style yourself. Have you worked here long?" 3 years, Jessica replied. "And do you like the job?" "It's a good job," she said diplomatically. Michael bought 4 pieces, spending over $5,000 without blinking. He saw the surprise on Jessica's face when she heard the total. "Will you be paying with a card?" asked the saleswoman. "A card is fine," said Michael, handing over a black credit card Eleanor had arranged for him. While the payment was processed, Michael chatted a bit more with Jessica. "Do you do anything besides working here?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "Studies, other jobs, dating," said Michael, trying to sound casual. Jessica hesitated before answering. "I'm single at the moment," she said, lowering her eyes. "What a surprise. A lovely young woman like you, surely there's no shortage of suitors." Jessica smiled sadly. "Sometimes things don't work out the way we hope." Michael felt the urge to comfort her, but stayed in character. "Maybe it's a matter of finding the right person," he said. "Or maybe it's about making the right choices," Jessica replied, with a hint of melancholy. When Michael left the store, he knew Jessica had been intrigued by him, but he also noticed she didn't seem entirely happy with her current situation. That night he told Eleanor everything. "How did you feel seeing her again?" Eleanor asked. "Confused," Michael admitted. "On one hand, I still love her. On the other, I was disappointed to see how interested she became when she realized I had money." "Was she interested in you or your money?" That's exactly the question I can't answer. Eleanor smiled. Then let's give her more opportunities to show her true intentions. The next day, Michael returned to the store. This time, he specifically asked for Jessica. "Mr. David," she said with a warmer smile than the day before. "It's so nice to see you again." "I came to exchange one of the pieces I bought yesterday," Michael lied. "My friend said she prefers another color." "Of course, no problem," said Jessica, eager to help. During the exchange, Michael steered the conversation towards something more personal. "Jessica, can I ask you something a bit personal?" "Go ahead." "Yesterday, you mentioned that sometimes things don't work out the way we hope. Were you referring to a romantic disappointment?" Jessica blushed. "I'm sorry, that was too forward of me," Michael said, feigning embarrassment. "No, it's fine," Jessica replied. "It's just, recently I went through a difficult situation. I was about to get married, but I ended up calling it off." "Oh my, that must have been a very tough decision." "It was the hardest one of my life," admitted Jessica, her eyes welling up. Michael felt the urge to reveal who he was and comfort her, but he held back. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. "Sometimes talking to a stranger can help." Jessica glanced around the store. It was a slow day with few customers. "I loved him very much," she said, lowering her voice, "but I was afraid our love wouldn't be enough to overcome our financial differences." "Financial differences?" "He is a simple man, hardworking, honest, but without much financial growth ahead, and I was raised in a family that values material security a lot." Michael felt a mix of pain and anger. Pain from hearing the confirmation that she had indeed rejected him over money, and anger at realizing she hadn't valued everything they'd built together. "Do you regret your decision?" he asked. Jessica stayed silent for a long moment. "Every day," she whispered. "Since I made that choice, I can't stop thinking about him." "Then why not try talking to him?" "Because I was too cruel. I turned him down at the altar, in front of his entire family. I don't believe he could ever forgive me." Michael was moved by the sincerity of Jessica's pain, but also frustrated by her shallowness. "Jessica, can I give you some advice?" "Of course." "True love is rare. If you really found that with this man, maybe you should fight for him regardless of financial concerns. It's easy to say that when you have money," Jessica said, eyeing the expensive clothes Michael had bought. "When you have financial security, it's easier to believe love is enough." Her response irritated him. She was assuming he'd never faced financial struggles. "How can you be sure I've always had money?" he asked. "By the way you dress, the car you drive, how easily you spend." "What if I told you it wasn't always like this?" Michael said. "What if I told you I worked very hard to get where I am today?" Jessica seemed intrigued. "Even so," she said, "you managed to build a life. My ex-boyfriend never showed that kind of ambition." Michael was deeply hurt by her words. She was judging his ambition based solely on his current financial state, without knowing his plans or dreams. "Maybe he had ambition, but just didn't have the opportunity," Michael suggested. "Maybe," Jessica agreed, but without conviction. Michael finished the transaction and left the store feeling more confused than before. On one hand, Jessica clearly regretted rejecting him. On the other, her reasons were still primarily about money. That afternoon, he met with Eleanor to discuss next steps. "How did it go today?" Eleanor asked. "She regrets rejecting me, but for the wrong reasons," Michael said. "How so?" "She misses what we had, but still thinks she made the right choice for practical reasons." Eleanor grew thoughtful. "Michael, what if you asked her out, as David, the businessman?" "Why?" "To see how she behaves when she's interested in someone with money." Michael hesitated. The idea of dating Jessica while pretending to be someone else seemed too complicated. "What if she finds out who I am?" "She won't," Eleanor said. "You look completely different. Besides, she'd never imagine you could have money." "I don't know, Mrs. Eleanor. This is getting too messy." "Michael, you need to be sure of her. Feelings before making any decisions about your future," Eleanor insisted. "If you two get back together without resolving this issue, there will always be doubts between you." Michael knew Eleanor was right. He needed to find out if Jessica was capable of loving someone for who they truly were. or if she would always be tied to material concerns. "All right," he agreed, "but how do I invite her without it seeming strange?" "Let it happen naturally," Eleanor suggested. "Keep visiting the store, building a friendship. When the time is right, you'll know." Over the next week, Michael visited the store 3 times. He always bought something and made sure to chat a little with Jessica. Gradually, she grew more comfortable around him. "David," she said during one of his visits, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course." "Have you always lived in New York City?" Michael had rehearsed answers for questions like this. "I spent a few years studying abroad," he said. "I came back recently to take over some family businesses." "What kind of businesses?" "Transportation and logistics," Michael replied, technically telling the truth. "That must be interesting." "It has its moments," Michael said. "What about you? Have you always wanted to work in fashion?" "Actually, I've always dreamed of having my own store," Jessica confessed. "Why don't you open one?" "Lack of capital," she said simply. Michael saw an opportunity. "Have you ever thought about looking for investors?" "I don't have any connections in the business world," Jessica admitted. "I do," Michael said. "If you're really interested, I could introduce you to some people." Jessica's eyes lit up. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course. But first, I'd like to hear more about your plans. How about we have dinner sometime to discuss it?" Jessica hesitated for only a second. "I'd love that," she said. "How about tonight?" Michael suggested. "Tonight?" Jessica seemed surprised by the quick invitation. "My schedule is packed next week," he explained. "If not tonight, it'd have to be 2 weeks from now." "All right," Jessica agreed. "Tonight it is." Michael arranged to pick her up at 8 at her place. When he hung up, he felt both anxious and guilty. He was about to go out with Jessica while pretending to be someone else, and it didn't feel right. But his need to uncover the truth about her feelings outweighed his moral hesitation. At exactly 8 o'clock, Michael pulled up in his Lexus in front of Jessica's house, a well-to-do middle-class home in an upscale neighborhood in southern New York City. He rang the doorbell and waited. Jessica opened the door, wearing an elegant dress and clearly nervous. "David, you're very punctual," she said. "Punctuality is a virtue I learned early," Michael replied. On the way to the restaurant, they made small talk. Michael had chosen a sophisticated spot, frequented by New York's elite. "Wow, this place is beautiful," Jessica remarked when they arrived. "It's one of my favorites," Michael said, recalling the etiquette lessons he'd taken. During dinner, Michael carefully observed Jessica's behavior. She was clearly impressed by the setting and how effortlessly he navigated the menu of expensive wines. "David, can I ask you something?" she said after the waiter poured her a glass of wine that cost more than her daily salary. "Of course." "How did you achieve so much success so young?" Michael had rehearsed this answer. "I worked hard, studied, and took advantage of opportunities that came my way," he said. "It must have been difficult." "All paths to success are hard," Michael replied. "The difference is some have more support than others." Jessica nodded as if she understood perfectly. "That's exactly what I tried to explain to my ex-fiancé," she said softly. "He thought love was enough, but I knew we needed more than that." Michael felt a sharp pain in his chest. "And what would this more be?" he asked. "Security, stability, the possibility of building a solid future." "You think he couldn't have offered that?" "Not in the way I needed," said Jessica. "He was a good man, but limited." The word limited echoed in Michael's mind like a personal insult. Jessica was referring to him as someone limited just because he worked as a mechanic. "What if he had potential you couldn't see?" asked Michael, trying to keep his voice calm. "Potential is different from concrete achievements," Jessica replied. "I couldn't bet my future on possibilities." Michael realized he was growing more and more disappointed with Jessica. The woman sitting across from him seemed very different from the person he had fallen in love with 3 years earlier. "Jessica, can I ask you a more direct question?" "Go ahead." "If your ex-fiancé showed up today with a hefty bank account, would you go back to him?" Jessica visibly squirmed at the question. "Why are you asking that?" "Curiosity," said Michael. I want to understand if your rejection was based on who he was or his financial situation. The two are connected, said Jessica. A person's financial situation says a lot about their personality, their ambition, their ability to achieve. Michael was shocked by the answer. Jessica was literally saying she judged people's character based on their financial status. Do you really believe that? I do, said Jessica without hesitation. Financially successful people are usually more determined, smarter, more organized. And ordinary people are less determined, less intelligent, and less organized. Jessica realized she sounded prejudiced. It's not exactly like that, she said, trying to explain. But it's undeniable that financial success requires certain qualities. Or certain opportunities, Michael corrected. True, Jessica agreed. That's why it's important to associate with people who've had those opportunities. Michael felt like he was seeing a side of Jessica he'd never known before. During their 3-year relationship, she had never expressed such materialistic views so clearly. Jessica, have you always thought this way? He asked. What do you mean? About the importance of money in relationships. Jessica hesitated. I think I've matured, she said finally. When I was younger, I thought love was enough, but life has taught me to be more practical. And who taught you that? Experience, she said vaguely. Michael suspected Richard had heavily influenced his daughter's opinions, but didn't want to push her to admit it. For the rest of dinner, they talked about Jessica's business plans. She had given a lot of thought to opening her own store and showed genuine interest in the subject. David, do you really know investors who could help me? She asked as they had dessert. I do, Michael confirmed, but I need to be sure you're truly committed to this project. I'm completely committed, Jessica said enthusiastically. Great. How about we schedule a meeting next week? I can introduce you to some people. That would be wonderful, said Jessica, clearly excited. When Michael dropped her off at home, Jessica thanked him effusively. David, thank you so much for dinner and the opportunity. It's been a long time since I felt so hopeful about the future. The pleasure was mine, said Michael. See you next week. Driving back home, Michael reflected on everything he'd learned during dinner. Jessica had clearly changed a lot since they'd met. Or maybe she'd always been this way, and he hadn't noticed because he was in love. At home, he told Mrs. Ruth everything. So, son, did you find out what you wanted to know? She asked. I found out the Jessica I loved may never have existed, Michael said sadly. Why? Because she showed opinions about money and success that deeply disappointed me. Mrs. Ruth hugged her son. Michael, sometimes people change. Under pressure. Maybe she isn't really like that. Or maybe she is exactly like that and I just never noticed. And now? Will you still go through with this plan? Michael thought for a moment. I'll give her one more chance to show me who she really is. The following Monday, Michael called Jessica. Jessica, it's David. How are you? David, I'm good, thank you. And you? Great. Remember when we talked about introducing you to some investors? Of course. Did you manage to set something up? I did. How about this afternoon at 3? Today? Jessica sounded surprised. I know it's last minute, but a unique opportunity came up. One of the investors is only in town today. Okay, Jessica agreed. Where's the meeting? Michael gave her the address of the building where Eleanor had her office. It's on the 20th floor. Ask for the Thompson Logistics office. Thompson Logistics? Jessica repeated. That's the investors' company, Michael explained. At 3 o'clock, Jessica arrived at the building nervous and excited. She had dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that projected professionalism. At the reception, she asked for the Thompson Logistics office and was directed to the 20th floor. When she stepped off the elevator, she found Michael waiting for her. David, so good to see you. Jessica, you look beautiful. Ready for the meeting? Ready, she said, taking a deep breath. Michael led her to the room where Eleanor was waiting. Everything had been set up to look like a legitimate business meeting. Jessica, this is Eleanor Thompson, president of Thompson Logistics, Michael introduced. It's a pleasure, Mrs. Thompson, Jessica said, shaking the older woman's hand. The pleasure is mine, dear, Eleanor replied. David has told me about your business plans. For the next hour, Eleanor and Michael led a convincing meeting. Jessica presented her ideas for the store, and Eleanor asked pointed questions about financial viability and market potential. "Jessica," Eleanor said at the end of the presentation, "your ideas are interesting. I'm willing to invest in your project." Jessica's eyes lit up. "Really? How much would you be willing to invest?" $50,000, yeah, Eleanor said as if it were a trivial amount. Jessica was speechless. It was far more money than she had ever dreamed of securing. "Mrs. Thompson, that's incredible. How do you handle this kind of investment?" "First, I'd like to get to know you better," Eleanor said. "How about dinner tomorrow night? You, me, and David?" "Of course, where?" Eleanor suggested a restaurant even more expensive than the one Michael had taken Jessica to before. "Perfect," Jessica agreed. "I'll be there." When Jessica left the meeting, she was euphoric. Michael walked her to the elevator. "David, I don't know how to thank you," and she said, "You're changing my life." "That's how we do business," Michael said. "We help people with potential." "And tomorrow night, will you be at dinner?" "Of course." Eleanor likes my input on investments. Alone in the descending elevator, Jessica couldn't contain her excitement. $50,000 was enough to open her dream store and still have money left for operating costs. When she got home, she immediately called her father. "Dad, you won't believe what happened today." "What is it, sweetheart?" "I got an investor for my store, $50,000, Richard was stunned. "How did you manage that?" "Through a customer at the store, a businessman named David Thompson." "Thompson," Richard repeated. "I don't know any Thompson in the business circles of New York City." "He said he spent some years studying abroad," explained Jessica. "That must be why you don't know him." "Sweetheart, be careful. Offers that seem too good to be true usually aren't." "Dad, his office is in the most expensive building on Wall Street. The woman who's investing is the president of a logistics company." "This is real." Richard was still skeptical, but didn't want to discourage his daughter. "All right, sweetheart. But be cautious and read everything before signing any documents." That night, Jessica could barely sleep from excitement. Her life was about to change completely, all thanks to the chance encounter with David. The next day, she spent the entire time preparing for dinner. She bought a new dress, went to the salon, and took care of every detail of her appearance. At 8 o'clock, she met Michael and Eleanor at the restaurant they had chosen. It was even more upscale than the last, frequented only by New York City's high society. "Jessica, you look stunning," said Michael, politely kissing her hand. "Thank you, David. You both look very elegant too." During dinner, Eleanor asked Jessica several personal questions as if assessing her character for the investment. "Jessica, tell me about your family," said Eleanor. "My father is a businessman in construction. My mother takes care of the home. We're a traditional family." "And relationships? Do you have a boyfriend?" Jessica hesitated. "I'm single at the moment." "By choice?" "It's a complicated situation," said Jessica, glancing subtly at Michael. "You can speak freely," encouraged Eleanor. "David and I are understanding people." Jessica took a deep breath. "I recently ended a 3-year relationship. I was even about to get married." "What happened?" asked Michael, feigning curiosity. "I realized we weren't compatible," said Jessica. "He was a good man, but our life goals were too different." "In what way?" pressed Eleanor. "He was content with little. I have bigger ambitions." Michael felt the same disappointment as the night before. "And do you think that's a flaw in him or a quality in you?" asked Eleanor. "I think it's just differences in personality," replied Jessica. "Some people are born to live simply, others to seek more from life." "And you fit into the second group?" asked Michael. "Definitely," said Jessica with conviction. Eleanor and Michael exchanged discreet glances. "Jessica," said Eleanor, "don't you miss that man?" "I do," admitted Jessica. "But I know I made the right decision for my future." "What if he had money?" asked Eleanor bluntly. "Would you go back to him?" Jessica was visibly uncomfortable with the question. "Why do you ask that?" "Because we want to understand your priorities," explained Michael. "To make an investment of this scale, We need to be sure you're focused and determined. I am, said Jessica. And about your question, if he had money, maybe I'd reconsider, but not just for the money itself. How so? Asked Eleanor. The money would prove he had more ambition and drive than I'd realized. Michael was deeply hurt by her answer. Jessica was literally saying she'd judge him differently if he had money. So you think money is a measure of a person's character? Asked Michael. Not a complete measure, but an important indicator, replied Jessica. Eleanor decided to make the final test. Jessica, let me tell you a story, she said. I know a young man who worked as a mechanic for years. Recently, he found out he's the heir to a $50 million fortune. What do you think? So about a situation like that? Jessica's eyes widened. 50 million. Wow, what luck he had. Luck? Michael asked. Don't you think he deserved that inheritance? Of course he did, if it was legally his, Jessica said. But what incredible luck to discover something like that. And what if you found out your ex-fiancé was in a similar situation? Eleanor asked. Jessica grew thoughtful for a moment. That would be very ironic, she said, because it would mean I rejected him for reasons that didn't exist. And what would you do? Michael pressed. Honestly? Jessica hesitated. I'd try to talk to him. I'd explain that my decision was based on the information I had at the time. And do you think he should forgive you? Eleanor asked. I think it would be understandable if he didn't, Jessica admitted. But I'd hope he'd understand that I didn't know all the circumstances. Michael felt the moment of truth had arrived. Jessica, he said, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe the sweat from his nervous hands. I need to tell you something. What is it? Michael took a deep breath, preparing for the revelation that would change everything. My name isn't David Thompson. Jessica stared at him, confused. What do you mean? My name is Michael Collins, and I'm your ex-fiancé. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica looked at Michael as if she was seeing a ghost. That's impossible, she whispered. Michael removed the colored contact lens he was wearing and shifted his posture slightly, returning to the mannerisms Jessica knew. It's impossible, but it's true. Jessica turned pale, looking back and forth between Michael and Eleanor. Are you playing a joke on me? She asked, her voice trembling. We're not joking, Eleanor said. I really am Michael's grandmother, and he really is the heir to a $50 million fortune. Jessica braced her hands on the table, trying to process the information. Michael, why would you do this to me? Because I needed to know if you really loved me or if you only cared about money, he answered, sadness in his voice. And what did you find out? She asked, tears in her eyes. I found out you're a very different person from the one I thought I knew. Jessica began to cry. Michael, I can explain. You don't need to explain, Michael said. You've made your feelings very clear these past few days. But I love you, Jessica said desperately. Do you love the poor Michael or the rich Michael? He asked. Jessica couldn't answer right away, and that said everything. Michael, she finally said, you don't understand the pressure I've been under from my family. My father convinced me I was making the wrong choice. And now that you know I have money, would your family approve of our relationship? Yes, Jessica admitted, lowering her head. Michael stood up from the table. Jessica, I loved you for 3 years, believing you loved me for who I was. Finding out your feelings depend on my bank account has been the biggest disappointment of my life. Michael, please, give me a chance to explain everything properly, Jessica begged. You've already explained, Jessica. These past few days, you've shown me exactly who you are. Michael signaled to Eleanor, indicating he wanted to leave. The inheritance is real, Eleanor told Jessica, but the investment in your store isn't happening. Please, Jessica said, standing as well. You can't just leave like this. We can, and we will, Michael said. Goodbye, Jessica. Michael and Eleanor left the restaurant, leaving Jessica alone with her regrets and tears. Outside, Michael leaned against the car, emotionally drained. How are you holding up, my dear? Eleanor asked. Devastated, Michael admitted, but also relieved to know the truth. And now, what will you do? Now I'll try to rebuild my life knowing who's really worth having by my side. The following week, Michael made some important decisions. First, he officially accepted his inheritance and took his place at Thompson Logistics. Second, he decided to keep his job at the auto shop, at least for now. "Robert," he said to his friend, "I found out I'm rich, but I don't want to stop being a mechanic." "What do you mean, man?" "I want to keep working here in the mornings and learning about the family business in the afternoons." "What about Jessica?" "Jessica found out I have money and wants to talk, but I'm not interested." Robert shook his head. "Man, some women are really complicated." "The problem isn't that she's complicated. The problem is she doesn't love me for who I am." Michael had decided not to answer Jessica's calls. She tried reaching him several times, but he was determined to move on. Richard, Jessica's father, was furious when he learned Michael's true identity. "Daughter, you lost the chance of a lifetime," he shouted. "A rich, young, handsome man, and you rejected him out of pure prejudice." "Dad, I didn't know." Jessica defended herself. "Exactly. You didn't know because you judged by appearances. This is a lesson for you to never judge anyone by their financial situation again." Jessica spent days trying to find a way to get close to Michael again. She decided to go to the auto shop where he worked. When she got there, she found Michael working on a car, wearing his mechanic's overalls. "Michael," she called. He looked up and saw her standing at the entrance of the shop. "What do you want here, Jessica?" "I want to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about." "Yes, we do," she insisted. "You deceived me, Michael. You pretended to be someone else." Michael dropped the tool he was using and walked toward her. "I pretended to be someone else," he said with irony. "Jessica, I realized I didn't know you. For 3 years I was with a woman who never existed." "That's not true." "Yes, it is," Michael interrupted. "The Jessica I knew didn't judge people by their money. The Jessica I knew loved me for who I was, not for what I had." "Michael, you don't understand the pressure I got from my family." "I understand perfectly," said Michael, "but I thought your family was just an obstacle we'd overcome together. I didn't expect you to agree with them." Jessica started to cry. "Michael, I love you. I've always loved you. Jessica, if you truly loved me, you would have stood up for me at the altar. You would have faced your family. You would have believed in us." "I was scared." "And now? Now that you know I have money, you're not scared anymore?" Jessica couldn't answer because she knew Michael was right. "Michael," she said finally, "what if we started over, pretending none of this happened?" "Impossible," Michael replied, "because now I know who you really are. And you know who I really am. We can't pretend nothing happened." "So you won't forgive me?" Michael was silent for a long moment. "Jessica, I might forgive you, but I can't forget, and I can't trust you again. Please, Michael, just give me one chance." "You already had your chance, Jessica, 3 years of chances, and when the moment came to show who you really were, you let me down." Jessica realized Michael was firm in his decision. "What if I change?" she asked, desperate. "People don't change, Jessica. They just reveal who they've always been." Jessica left the shop knowing she had lost Michael forever, not because of money, but because of her own choices and priorities. 2 months passed. Michael had adjusted well to his new reality. He worked at the auto shop in the mornings and at the family business in the afternoons. He'd discovered he really liked the business world and had a natural talent for management. Eleanor was proud of her grandson. "Michael, you're doing better than I expected," she said during a meeting at the company. "Thank you, Grandma. I'm learning a lot." "And your personal life, how is it?" "Quiet," Michael replied. "I'm not ready to get involved with anyone yet." "That's understandable. But don't close yourself off to love because of one disappointment." Michael knew Eleanor was right, but he still felt hurt by the whole situation. That afternoon, as he was driving home from the office, Michael stopped at a red light and saw something that caught his attention. A young woman stood beside a broken-down car on the street, holding a small child in her arms. She looked lost and desperate. Michael parked his car and approached. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman looked at him with relief. "Please, my car broke down and my daughter has a fever. I need to get her to the hospital." "Let's take my car," Michael said without hesitation. "Leave yours here. We'll figure it out later." On the way to the hospital, Michael learned the woman's name was Sarah and that she was a nurse. She was a single mother and had been on her way home from work when her car broke down. "Thank you so much," Sarah said when they arrived at the hospital. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," Michael replied. "Just take care of your daughter." "How can I contact you to pay for my car repairs?" Sarah asked. "Don't worry about that now," Michael said. "Focus on your daughter." That night, Michael couldn't stop thinking about Sarah and her daughter. There was something about the simplicity and gratitude of that woman that deeply moved him. The next day, he went back to the hospital to check on the child. "Michael," Sarah said, surprised to see him, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see how your daughter is doing." "She's fine, thank you. It was just a virus. She's already been discharged." "That's good," Michael said, relieved. "Michael, about yesterday, I couldn't afford a cab to the hospital. You saved my daughter. Anyone would have done the same." "That's not true," Sarah said. "Many people passed us on the street and no one stopped to help." Michael was touched by Sarah's sincerity. "Sarah, can I take you out for coffee?" he asked impulsively. "Of course," she agreed with a genuine smile. They went to a simple diner near the hospital. During their conversation, Michael discovered Sarah was an extraordinary person. She worked as a nurse at a public hospital, raised her daughter alone, and still found time to volunteer in underserved communities. "Michael, what do you do for work?" Sarah asked. "I'm a mechanic," Michael replied, deciding to keep part of the truth to himself for now. "That's great. It must be interesting work." "It is. And have you always wanted to be a nurse?" "Always," Sarah answered. "Ever since I was little, I dreamed of helping people." Michael was impressed by the passion Sarah had for her work. It was so different from Jessica's attitude, who saw work only as a way to make money. In the days that followed, Michael and Sarah began meeting regularly. He offered to help with her car repairs, and she insisted on paying, even if it was in installments. "Sarah, you don't need to worry about the money," Michael said. "Yes, I do," she replied. "I don't accept charity from anyone." "It's not charity. It's just one friend helping another." "Even so, I'll pay," Sarah insisted. "It's a matter of dignity." Michael was struck by Sarah's pride and independence. She worked hard for everything she had and didn't expect anyone to solve her problems. 3 weeks after meeting Sarah, Michael realized he was falling in love with her. It was a different feeling from what he'd experienced with Jessica. With Sarah, he felt at peace, respected, valued for who he truly was. "Robert," he said to his friend at the workshop, "I think I'm falling in love." "With Jessica?" "No. With a woman named Sarah, a nurse I met a few weeks ago." "And does she know about your inheritance?" "No, and I don't plan on telling her yet." "Why not?" "Because I want to be sure she loves me for who I am, not for what I have." "Michael, don't you think you're being paranoid because of what happened with Jessica?" "Maybe," Michael admitted, "but I'd rather be careful." Sarah was also falling for Michael. He was different from all the men she'd ever known. He was kind, hard-working, responsible, and showed genuine interest in her life and her daughter. "Emma," she said to her 4-year-old, "what do you think of Michael?" "He's nice, Mommy, and he fixes cars." "That's true," Sarah agreed. "He fixes a lot of things." A month after they met, Michael and Sarah were officially dating. It was a simple, honest relationship, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Michael had decided to tell Sarah about his inheritance, but every time he was about to, something stopped him. He was afraid the news would change the dynamic between them. "Grandma," he said to Eleanor, "I'm dating a wonderful woman." "That's great, my dear. Tell me about her." "She's a nurse, a single mother, hardworking, honest, a good person." "And does she know about your inheritance?" "Not yet." "Michael, you can't build a relationship on secrets." "I know, I'm just waiting for the right time." "The right time is now," Eleanor said, "before you two get any deeper into this." Michael knew Eleanor was right, but he kept putting off the conversation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. 2 weeks later, Michael finally decided to tell Sarah everything. He planned a special dinner at a modest but nice restaurant. "Sarah," he said during dessert, "there's something important I need to tell you." "What is it?" she asked, noticing the seriousness in his tone. "It's about my financial situation." Sarah tensed up. Over the past few weeks, she'd noticed Michael always insisted on paying, but she thought it was just kindness. "Michael, if you're having money troubles, we can split expenses more fairly," she said. "No, it's not that," Michael replied. "It's the opposite." "What do you mean?" Michael took a deep breath. "Sarah, I'm not just a mechanic. I'm also the heir to a logistics company. I have an inheritance of $50 million. Sarah stared at him as if he were joking. "Michael, this isn't funny." "I'm not." "Joking," he said. "It's true. You're telling me you're a millionaire." "I am." Sarah was silent for several minutes, processing the news. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she finally asked. "Because I wanted to be sure you loved me for me, not for my money. And you think I'm the kind of person who'd only care about you for your wealth?" Michael realized he'd hurt Sarah. "No, I don't think that about you, but I had a past experience that made me insecure." "What kind of experience?" Michael told Sarah the whole story with Jessica. She listened quietly, understanding his fears better. "Michael," she said when he finished, "I get why you were careful, but it hurts to know you felt the need to test me." "I wasn't testing." "Sayuki, yes, you were," Sarah interrupted. "You were waiting to see if I'd show interest in your money." Michael realized she was right. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. Michael, I work 12 hours a day at the hospital, take care of my daughter alone, and still do volunteer work. Do you really think I have the time or energy to be interested in men just for their money?" "No, you're right. It was foolish of me." Sarah fell silent for a moment. "Michael, I need some time to think about all this." "What does that mean?" "It means finding out my boyfriend kept such an important thing from me has shaken me up." Michael felt the fear of losing Sarah. "Please don't leave me over this." "I'm not leaving you," Sarah said. "I just need to process this and understand how I feel about it." That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about Michael's revelation. She wasn't angry that he had money. She was disappointed he felt the need to hide it from her. The next day, she talked to her older sister, Jennifer. "Jennifer, Michael told me he's a millionaire," Sarah said. "Wow, how do you feel about that?" "Confused. On one hand, I'm happy for him. On the other, I'm upset he didn't trust me." "Sarah, from what you've told me about his ex-fiancée, it makes sense he was cautious. I know, but it made me feel like he thought I was just like her." Jennifer thought for a moment. "Sarah, do you love Michael?" "Yes." "And does he love you?" "Yes." "Then is his money really the problem?" Sarah realized the answer was no. Michael's money wasn't the issue. The lack of trust was. 2 days later, Sarah went to Michael. "Michael, can we talk?" "Of course," he said nervously. "I've thought a lot about our conversation from the other day." And I realized you didn't trust me," Sarah said. "And a relationship without trust doesn't work." Michael's heart raced. "Sarah, please, let me finish," she interrupted. "You didn't trust me, but I understand why. Your past experience traumatized you." "Exactly. But now I need to know if you'll be able to trust me from here on out." "I will," Michael said without hesitation. "How can I be sure?" Michael considered the question. "Because from now on, I won't hide anything from you. And because I'll work to overcome my insecurities." For the first time in 2 days, Sarah smiled. "Michael, I love you. And I don't care if you have $50 million or 50 cents. I fell in love with the man who helped me on the street, who plays with my daughter, who works honestly every day." Michael felt an immense relief. "Sarah, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And you're the best thing that's happened to me too." They kissed, sealing not just their reconciliation, but the start of a new chapter in their relationship, one built on complete honesty. In the months that followed, Michael and Sarah built a strong bond. He helped pay for little Emma's education, but always respected Sarah's pride and independence. "Michael," Sarah said 6 months later, "you've changed our lives." "You've changed mine too," he replied. Michael had found in Sarah and Emma the family he'd always dreamed of, one based on real love, respect, and strong values. A year after meeting Sarah, Michael decided to propose. But first, he wanted to be sure he was doing it for all the right reasons. "Grandma," he said to Eleanor, "I want to marry Sarah." "How wonderful! When are you setting the date?" "I haven't asked yet. I want to be sure I'm doing this for the right reasons." "What reasons would those be?" "I want to make sure I'm marrying her because I truly love her, not just because she's different from Jessica." Eleanor smiled. "Michael, do you think you'd spend an entire year with someone just to prove a point?" "No, of course not." "Then you already have your answer. You love Sarah, and she loves you. The rest is nonsense." Michael knew Eleanor was right. His feelings for Sarah were genuine and deep. The following week, Michael organized a simple but heartfelt marriage proposal. He took Sarah and Emma to a picnic in the park where they often played on weekends. "Sarah," he said, kneeling on the grass, "will you marry me?" Sarah was surprised and moved. "Michael, are you sure?" "Absolutely," he replied. "I want to spend the rest of my life taking care of you and Emma." "Yes," Sarah exclaimed. "Of course, yes." Emma, who had been included in the conversation beforehand, ran to hug Michael. "Now you're going to be my dad?" she asked. "If you want me to be," Michael answered, tears in his eyes. "I do," Emma said. At that moment, Michael knew he had found his true family. 2 months before Michael and Sarah's wedding, Jessica showed up at the garage again. Michael hadn't seen her in almost a year. "Michael," she said, "I heard you're getting married." "It's true," he confirmed. "To a nurse." "Yes." Jessica was silent for a moment. "Does she know about your inheritance?" "She does." "And she still wants to marry you?" "Jessica, she wants to marry me, despite the inheritance, not because of it." Jessica understood the unspoken difference in his answer. "Michael, I came here to apologize." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Jessica insisted. "You were right about me. I was shallow and materialistic. It took me almost a year to admit that." Michael stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "And what changed?" "I spent this whole year alone thinking about our conversations. I realized you've always been a person of integrity, and I didn't appreciate that." "Jessica, I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change anything between us." "I know," Jessica said. "I just wanted you to know I recognize my mistakes, and I wanted to wish you happiness in your marriage." "Thank you," Michael replied. "I wish you happiness too." Jessica turned to leave but stopped at the door. "Michael?" "Yes?" "Your fiancée is a lucky woman." "Actually," Michael said with a smile, "I'm the lucky one." After Jessica left, Michael felt at peace. There was no more resentment, only gratitude for having discovered in time who she really was. Michael and Sarah's wedding was simple and moving. It took place in the same church where he had been rejected by Jessica, but this time it was filled with love and hope. Mrs. Ruth cried with happiness, seeing her son find a woman who truly loved him. Eleanor was proud of the grandson who had grown into a wise and honorable man. Robert was the best man, and Emma was the flower girl. It was an unconventional family, but one bound by true love. During the ceremony, Michael looked at Sarah in her wedding dress and knew he was making the right choice. She wasn't there out of social obligation or financial interest. She was there because she chose to build a life with him. "Michael," said Father Richard, the same priest who had witnessed his humiliation a year earlier, "do you take Sarah to be your wife?" "I do," Michael answered with complete conviction. "Sarah, do you take Michael to be your husband?" "I do," she replied, tears of joy in her eyes. When they kissed at the end of the ceremony, Michael felt his life had finally found its true purpose. At the reception, Eleanor gave an emotional speech. "Michael," she said, "when I found you a year ago, you were a hurt and distrustful young man. Today, you're a fulfilled and happy man. Sarah, thank you for bringing joy back to my grandson." Mrs. Ruth also spoke. "Sarah, thank you for loving my son the way he deserves to be loved. And Michael, thank you for giving me a wonderful daughter-in-law and granddaughter." The party was simple, but filled with special moments. Michael danced with Sarah, with Emma, with Mrs. Ruth, and with Eleanor. All the important women in his life were gathered in one place. At the end of the night, as they were leaving for their honeymoon, Michael received a message from Jessica. "Congratulations, Michael. You found true love. Thank you for showing me the kind of person I no longer want to be." Michael showed the message to Sarah. "How do you feel about that?" she asked. "At peace," Michael replied. "Finally, at peace." 2 years after the wedding, Michael and Sarah were expecting their first child together. Emma, now 7 years old, was thrilled to become a big sister. "Michael," Sarah said, her hand on her belly, "do you think we'll be good parents?" "I'm sure of it," he answered, "because we'll raise our children with the right values." "What values are those?" "Honesty, hard work, respect for others, and the certainty that true love is worth more than any material wealth." Sarah smiled. "Those are perfect values." Michael looked out the window of their home in Westchester, where they now lived as a family. Eleanor had insisted they move there, and Sarah had agreed, as long as she could keep working at the hospital. "Michael," Sarah said, "do you regret anything in our story?" "Not a thing," he answered without hesitation. "Not even the experience with Jessica." "Why not?" "Because if I hadn't gone through that, maybe I wouldn't appreciate what I have with you." Sarah moved closer to him. "You know I'd love you even if you were poor, right?" "I know. And you know I'd love you even if you were rich, right?" "I know," Sarah laughed. "Then we're even," Michael said, kissing her. That night, as Emma slept in her room and Sarah rested beside him, Michael reflected on his journey. He had discovered he was the heir to a fortune, but more importantly, he had learned the value of the people who truly mattered in his life. His mother, Mrs. Ruth, now lived comfortably in an apartment he had bought for her, but she remained as simple and wise as ever. Eleanor had become not just his grandmother, but also his mentor in business and life. Robert was still his best friend and partner at the auto shop, which Michael had bought and turned into a thriving business. Emma was the daughter of his heart he had always wanted. Sarah was the perfect companion who loved him for his strengths and flaws, and the baby on the way represented the continuation of a family built on true love. At 29, Michael had learned that true wealth wasn't in the 50 million he had inherited, but in the people who chose to stay by his side, not out of interest, but out of love. Jessica, meanwhile, had gone through deep reflection in those 2 years. Her experience with Michael had made her more mature and less superficial. She was now dating a public school teacher, a simple man who truly loved her, and for the first time in her life, she was happy regardless of financial matters. Richard, her father, had taken time to accept his daughter's new boyfriend, but eventually admitted her happiness was more important than social status. One Sunday morning, Michael was playing with Emma in the yard when he saw a couple walking down the street. It was Jessica and her new boyfriend. They greeted him politely as they passed. "Michael," Jessica said, "are you doing well?" "Very well, thank you," he replied. "That's good. You deserve all the happiness in the world." "You too, Jessica." As they walked away, Emma asked, "Daddy, who was that lady?" "Someone who helped me realize what truly matters in life," Michael answered. "And what is it that truly matters?" Michael looked at the house where his wife was preparing lunch for the family, where his grandmother and mother were chatting in the living room, where his future child was growing in the womb of the woman he loved. Family, true love, and people who love us for who we are, not for what we have. "I love you for who you are, Dad," said Emma. "And I love you for who you are too, Princess." At that moment, Michael knew he had found true happiness. Not because he was rich, but because he was loved for the right reasons by the right people. The fortune he had inherited was just a bonus in a life already full of love, family, and purpose. And when he looked to the future, he saw not a wealthy man who had married for convenience, but a fulfilled man who had chosen to build his life on the most important values: love, honesty, hard work, and family. 3 years later, Michael and Sarah had become parents to twins, Ethan and Noah. The family was complete and happy. Michael had learned to balance his life as a businessman and a family man. He still worked in the workshop a few mornings a week because he loved hands-on work, and he dedicated the rest of his time to the family business and his loved ones. Sarah had reduced her hours at the hospital to care for the babies, but continued, doing volunteer work in underserved communities, now with Michael's financial support. Eleanor, at 75, was the proudest grandmother in the world. She loved playing with her great-grandchildren and teaching Emma about their family history. Mrs. Ruth had become the best nanny a family could ask for. She cared for her grandchildren with all the dedication in the world and could finally enjoy a peaceful and comfortable old age. One Saturday afternoon, as the whole family gathered for a barbecue in the yard, Michael looked around and felt immense gratitude. "Sarah," he said to his wife, "have you ever imagined how different our lives would be if we'd met before all that mess with Jessica?" "I imagine it would have been simpler," Sarah replied, "but maybe not as special." "Why do you say that?" "Because you wouldn't have learned to value true love, and I wouldn't have met the wiser, more mature version of you." Michael smiled. "You're right. Maybe we went through all that to prepare us to be happy together." "Absolutely," Sarah agreed. "Every bad experience prepared us to recognize and cherish the good things." That night, after the children were asleep and the grandparents had gone home, Michael and Sarah talked about their plans for the future. "Michael," Sarah said, "are you happy with the life we've built?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible," he replied. "And you?" "Me too. Sometimes I catch myself thinking I'm living in a dream." "It's not a dream," Michael said. "It's the result of the right choices and a lot of hard work to build something solid." "And a lot of love," Sarah added. "A lot of love," Michael agreed. They kissed, knowing they had found the formula for true happiness: genuine love, strong values, honest work, and a family built with care and dedication. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Michael threw a surprise party for Sarah. He invited the whole family and their closest friends. During his speech, he spoke about the journey that had brought them there. "5 years ago," he said, "I was a lost and distrustful man. I thought I'd never be able to trust a woman's love again. But Sarah showed me that true love exists and that it's worth waiting for. Sarah taught me that real wealth isn't in money, but in the people we choose to share our lives with. She taught me that family isn't just about blood, but about who chooses to stand by us through good times and bad. That's why I want to thank not only Sarah but our entire family, my mother, Mrs. Ruth, who taught me the values that brought me here, my grandmother Eleanor, who showed me where I come from and helped me discover who I am, Emma, who taught me how to be a father before I even became one, and Ethan and Noah, who showed me how love can multiply infinitely." Everyone applauded, moved by Michael's words. Sarah also gave a speech. "Michael," she said, "when we first met, I was a single mother just trying to survive day by day. You didn't just come into my life, you came into Emma's too, and you gave us a family. You showed me that there are honest, hard-working men who value family above all else. You proved that love can overcome any obstacle as long as it's real. Thank you for choosing to build a life with me, for loving my daughter as your own, for giving me 2 beautiful sons, and for showing me every day that fairy tales can come true when you find the right person." After the party, when they were alone at home, Michael and Sarah talked about the future. "Michael," Sarah said, "what do you want for the next 5 years?" "I want to see our children grow up healthy and happy. I want to keep building the company my grandfather started, and I want to grow old by your side." "Those are my wishes too," Sarah said. "And you? What do you dream of for the future?" "I dream of opening a community clinic to help those in need. I dream of seeing Emma graduate from college. I dream of being a grandmother to the grandchildren our children will give us. And I dream of still being in love with you when I'm 80. Michael kissed her. "All those dreams will come true," he said, "because when you have true love, honest work, and a close-knit family, anything is possible." 10 years after their wedding, Michael was celebrating another milestone in his life: Emma's graduation from medical school. She had followed in her mother's footsteps in healthcare, but chose to specialize in pediatrics. "Dad," Emma said, holding her newly earned diploma, "thank you for supporting me all these years of studying." "Emma, I did nothing but believe in you," Michael replied. "All the credit is yours. You gave me a family, stability, and the chance to dream big. Without that, I never would have made it here." Ethan and Noah, now 7 years old, watched their older sister with admiration. "Dad," Ethan said, "when I grow up, I want to be just like Emma." "Me too," Noah added. Michael smiled, touched by how much his sons looked up to their sister. "You can be whatever you want," he said. "What matters is always working with honesty and dedication." Sarah joined the group holding the family's youngest baby, Olivia, just 6 months old, who had been a wonderful surprise for everyone. "Michael," Sarah said, "do you see how much our family has grown?" "I see it, and it moves me," he replied, cradling Olivia in his arms. Eleanor, now 82 but still sharp and active, watched the scene with tears in her eyes. "Michael," she said, "your grandfather would be so proud of the family you've built." "Grandma, everything we are today started with the values you and he planted. And it will keep growing for generations to come," Eleanor said, gazing at her great-grandchildren. Mrs. Ruth, at 75, was still the most loving matriarch a family could ask for. "My son," she said to Michael, "remember when you were heartbroken over that girl who rejected you?" "I remember, Mom. You thought your life was over, and look where we are now. You always said God had better plans for me." "And he did," Mrs. Ruth said, smiling. "Sometimes the bad things that happen are just the path to the good things coming your way." That night, after Emma's graduation party, the family was gathered in the living room of their Westchester home. The children played on the rug. Sarah nursed Olivia, and the adults reminisced about old times. "Michael," said Emma, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, sweetheart." "All through my teens, I was afraid you and Mom would split up like her birth parents did." Michael was surprised by the confession. "Why were you afraid of that?" "Because I heard my school friends talk about parents getting divorced, about families falling apart, and I didn't want to lose you." Sarah stopped nursing Olivia and looked at her daughter. "Emma, why didn't you ever tell us this?" "Because I was afraid you'd think I was being silly." Michael moved closer to Emma and hugged her. "Sweetheart, you'll never lose me. I chose to be your father, and that choice is forever. Even if I weren't a kid anymore. Even if you were an 80-year-old lady," Michael said, laughing. "And even if I make mistakes." "Especially if you make mistakes," Michael replied. "That's when we need family the most." Emma got emotional. "Daddy, thank you for coming into our lives. Thank you for letting me be part of yours." Ethan and Noah, who had been listening, came closer. "Daddy," Ethan asked, "will you love me forever too?" "Forever and then some," Michael answered. "What about me?" Noah asked. "You too, son." "And Olivia?" they both asked together. "And Olivia too," Michael said, looking at the baby asleep in Sarah's arms. Eleanor watched the scene with a smile. "Michael," she said, "do you know your greatest wealth?" "What is it, Grandma?" "The ability to love unconditionally. That's something no amount of money can buy." "I learned that from you and my mother," Michael said. "And now you're teaching your children," Eleanor replied. "That's how love carries on through generations." Later that night, when everyone was asleep, Michael stepped onto the porch and gazed at the stars. Sarah joined him, holding Olivia, who had woken up. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How surprising life is," Michael answered. 15 years ago, I was just a simple guy working in a garage, dreaming of building a family with Jessica. And now I have a family better than I ever dreamed. A wife who truly loves me, wonderful children, a thriving business, and the certainty that I'm on the right path. Do you regret anything?" "The time I wasted suffering over someone who didn't deserve me," Michael said. "But even that was important. It taught me to appreciate you." Sarah moved closer. "Michael, you know I'd love you even if you were the poorest man in the world, right?" "I know, and you know I'd love you even if you were the richest woman in the world?" "I know," Sarah smiled. "We're quite the pair." "We're quite the family," Michael corrected, looking at Olivia. The next day, Michael got an unexpected call. It was Robert, his old co-worker from the garage. "Michael, I need to tell you something," Robert said, his voice serious. "What happened?" "Jessica showed up at the garage yesterday." Michael was stunned. He hadn't heard from Jessica in over 5 years. What did she want? She said she's getting married and wanted to invite you to the wedding. What? She's marrying that professor she was dating. She insisted you come to the ceremony. Michael was thoughtful. What did you tell her? That I'd pass along the message, but the decision was yours. Did she leave any specific note? She said she wanted to thank you in person for teaching her about real love. Michael told Sarah about the invitation. What do you think? He asked. I think you should go, replied Sarah, surprising Michael. Really? Really? You left things unresolved years ago, and it seems she really learned something from that whole experience. You wouldn't be bothered? Why would I be? Asked Sarah. I know you love me. I know our family is solid. I'm not afraid of the past. But what if people talk? Let them talk, said Sarah. The people who truly know us understand who we are. Michael decided to accept the invitation. The following Saturday, he attended Jessica's wedding to Professor Daniel Miller, a simple and honest man who truly loved her. The ceremony was held in a small church, a far cry from the extravagance Jessica used to value. Michael arrived a few minutes before it began and sat in one of the back rows. When Jessica entered the church, Michael noticed how different she looked, more mature, more serene, genuinely happy. There was no showiness in her dress or the decorations. There was only love. During the ceremony, Michael watched the way Jessica looked at Daniel. It was a gaze of pure love, free of calculation or ulterior motives. It was the same look Sarah gave him every day. After the ceremony, Jessica approached Michael. Michael, thank you so much for coming, she said. Congratulations, Jessica. You both look very happy. We are, she replied, and I wanted to thank you. Thank me for what? For showing me I was living the wrong way. If you hadn't played that trick on me, I would have never realized how shallow I was. Michael was moved by Jessica's sincerity. Jessica, I'm sorry for deceiving you. Back then, it wasn't right of me. Don't apologize, Jessica said. It was the best thing anyone ever did for me. It forced me to look inside myself and dislike what I saw. And what changed? Everything, she answered. I started valuing people for their character, not their money. I began looking for men who truly loved me, not just those who wanted to impress me. And you found Daniel. I did, Jessica said with a genuine smile. A man who earns a teacher's salary, who can't give me luxuries, but loves me in a way I never thought possible. That's the kind of love worth having, Michael said. It's exactly the kind of love you have with your wife, Jessica replied. I saw you both at Emma's graduation. The way you look at each other, it's beautiful. Michael was surprised. You were at Emma's graduation? Yes, I work at the same hospital as your wife. We've been colleagues for a few years. Sarah never told me that. Because I asked her not to, Jessica explained. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. What's it like working with her? It's an honor, Jessica said. Your wife is one of the most principled people I've ever met, an exemplary, professional and a devoted mother. Michael felt proud hearing Jessica speak about Sarah. Jessica, I'm happy you found your happiness. And I'm happy you found yours too, Jessica said. You both deserve all the happiness in the world. When Michael returned home and told Sarah about his conversation with Jessica, she didn't seem surprised. You knew she worked at your hospital, Michael asked. I did, Sarah admitted, but I didn't think it was necessary to tell you. Why? Because she's just a co-worker. The past is the past. What's she like at work? A competent professional and someone who's changed a lot, Sarah said. Sometimes we talk about life, and she always mentions how you helped her grow as a person. She told you that? Many times. She says you were the best teacher she ever had, even if you didn't realize you were teaching. Michael was emotional. Sarah, you don't feel jealous or resentful toward her. Why would I? Asked Sarah. If she hadn't rejected you, you would never have been available for me. I owe her so much. Michael embraced his wife. How can you be so mature and understanding? Because I learned from you that true love has no room for silly insecurities, said Sarah. 2 years later, Michael was facing one of the greatest challenges of his life. Eleanor had begun showing signs of a degenerative disease affecting her. Memory, "Grandma," Michael said during a doctor's visit, "we'll face this together." "And my grandson?" Eleanor replied, lucid in her clearer moments. "I'm not afraid of passing, I'm afraid of forgetting all of you." "You'll never forget us," Michael assured her, "because the love you planted in us will live on forever." Eleanor smiled. "Michael, I want to ask you something." "Anything, Grandma. I want you to tell your children about our family's story, about your grandfather, how we built the company and the values we always stood for." "I will, Grandma. I promise. And I want you to keep being the honorable man you've always been. Don't let money change who you are." "I won't," Michael vowed. For the next 2 years, Michael cared for Eleanor with unwavering dedication. Sarah supported him unconditionally, and their children learned compassion and respect for the elderly. When Eleanor passed away at 86, she left behind a united family and a thriving business, but above all, a legacy of love and values that would endure for generations. At the funeral, Michael gave a heartfelt speech. "Eleanor Thompson was more than my grandmother," he said. "She was my mentor, my friend, my inspiration. She taught me that true wealth lies in the people we love and the values we uphold. Grandma, thank you for finding me when I was lost. Thank you for showing me where I came from and helping me discover where I'm going. Your legacy will live on in each of us." After the funeral, as the family gathered at home, Michael spoke to his children about the future. "Dad," said Emma, now 25 and a medical school graduate, "what will happen to the company?" "I'll keep running it," Michael replied. "But I want you all to know you're free to choose your own paths." "What do you mean?" asked Ethan, now 15. "You don't have to work for the family business. Pursue any career you want with my full support." "What if we choose to work there?" asked Noah. "Then you'll start at the bottom just like I did," Michael said. "You'll learn the value of hard work and earn every position you hold." Sarah watched the conversation with pride. "Michael," she said, "you're raising our children the right way." "I'm trying to raise them the way my mother raised me," Michael replied, "with love but also responsibility." Mrs. Ruth, now 82 but still sharp and active, smiled. "My son, you've surpassed every expectation I ever had for you. Mom, everything I am is because of you." "No, my son, you built your own story. I just planted the seeds." That night, Michael reflected on everything that had happened in his life. At 42, he was fulfilled in every way. Professionally, he had turned Thompson Logistics into one of the largest companies in its sector in New York City, always maintaining ethical practices and social responsibility. Personally, he had a wonderful family, a wife who loved him unconditionally, children he admired and respected, and the memory of loved ones who lived on in his heart. Financially, his wealth had grown significantly, but he had never lost the humility and simplicity that defined him. And morally, he held on to the values he had learned from Mrs. Ruth and Eleanor: honesty, hard work, respect for others, and love for family. The next morning, Michael decided to do something he had been planning for a long time. He went to look for Robert at the workshop. "Robert," he said, "I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "I want you to be my partner in a new business." "How so?" "I want to open a technical school to train mechanics, a place where young people from low-income backgrounds can learn a trade and get a chance in life." Robert was moved. "Michael, that's amazing. But why do you want to do this?" "Because I want to give back the opportunities I had. I want to give other young people the chance you gave me when you hired me." "And you want me as your partner?" "I want you to be the technical director," said Michael. "No one understands mechanics and teaching better than you." Robert hugged his friend. "Michael, I accept right away." The Michael Collins Technical School opened 2 years later in the neighborhood where Michael had grown up. It was a tribute to the simple man he had always been, not the wealthy businessman he had become. At the inauguration, Michael gave a speech to the first students. "You're here because someone believes in your potential," he said. "I started just like you, young, with few opportunities, but eager to work. What you learn here can change your lives. But remember, success isn't just measured by the money you make, but by the character you keep and the people you help along the way. Work hard, be honest, respect your peers and teachers, And above all, never forget where you came from. Mungtio. The first class was a 17-year-old named Tyler, who lived with his grandmother in a nearby slum. "Mr. Michael," Tyler said after class, "is it true you started as a mechanic?" "It's true," Michael confirmed. "And how did you get to where you are now?" "By working honestly, studying, and having people who believed in me," Michael replied. "Do you think I can go far too?" Michael looked at Tyler and saw in his eyes the same determination he himself had had in his youth. "Tyler, I'm sure you can go as far as you want. It's all up to you." 2 years later, Tyler had become the school's top student and earned a scholarship to study mechanical engineering at a private university. "Mr. Michael," Tyler said on graduation day, "thank you for believing in me." "Tyler, you're proof that investing in education and opportunities is worth it." "You changed my life." "You changed your own life," Michael corrected. "I just opened a door. You were the one who walked through it." At the graduation party for the school's first class, Michael was accompanied by his entire family. Emma, now 28, was engaged to a fellow doctor. Ethan and Noah, 18, were preparing to start college. Olivia, 8, watched everything with curiosity. "Daddy," Olivia asked, "why did you create this school?" "Because I want other kids to have the same opportunities I had," Michael replied. "Will you open more schools?" "God willing, yes." "Can I help when I grow up?" "Of course you can, sweetheart. Every bit of help is welcome." Sarah watched the conversation with pride. "Michael," she said, "you're planting seeds that will bear fruit for decades." "I'm trying to do what Eleanor always did. Think about the next generations." "And you're succeeding." That night at home, Michael received an unexpected call. It was Jessica. "Michael, sorry to call so late," she said. "It's fine, Jessica. Is something wrong?" "I wanted to congratulate you on the school. I saw the article in the paper." "Thank you." "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Say, of course." "Do you still hate me for what I did to you?" Michael was surprised by the question. "Jessica, I never hated you. I was hurt back then, but I never felt hate. Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," said Michael, "because I realized you did me a favor." "How so?" "If you hadn't rejected me, I never would have met Sarah. I never would have built the family I have today." Jessica was moved. "Michael, you're an incredible person. Daniel Miller always says he wants to be like you when he grows up." Michael laughed. "He's already a better man than I am. He won your love honestly. And so did you. You won Sarah's love by being who you truly are." "That's true. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me." After hanging up, Michael told Sarah about the conversation. "How do you feel about it?" asked Sarah. "At peace," Michael replied. "Completely at peace. Even knowing she called you after midnight." "Sarah, are you jealous?" Michael teased. "Not even a little," Sarah answered. "I was just testing to see if you noticed it was strange." "I did, but I think she just wanted to make peace for good." "And did she?" "She did. There's nothing left unresolved between us." The following year, Michael faced one of the hardest moments of his life. Mrs. Ruth, now 85, began having health problems. "My son," she said one afternoon when they were alone, "I want to ask you something." "Anything, Mum." "When I'm gone, I don't want you blaming yourself for anything." "Mom, don't talk like that." "Michael, I've had a wonderful life. I've seen my son become a successful man, met beautiful grandchildren, lived to see you happy and fulfilled. Mom, we still have plenty of time together." "Maybe yes, maybe no," said Mrs. Ruth. "But what matters is, we made the most of the time we had. You were the best mother in the world, and you were the best son a mother could ask for." Mrs. Ruth lived 2 more years, surrounded by her family's love. When she finally passed at 87, she left behind a united family and a legacy of a life dedicated to love and hard work. At the funeral, Michael was inconsolable. Sarah stood by him, as did their children and all their friends. "Daddy," said Emma, "Grandma was proud of you." "How can you be sure?" Michael asked through tears. "Because she always said so. She always told everyone how proud she was of the son she raised." Robert, who had become more than a friend, almost a brother, comforted Michael. "Michael, your mother lived to see you happy. That's all a mother could ask for." I'm going to miss her so much, Robert. We all will, but she lives on in you, in your children, in the way you raise them. After Mrs. Ruth's passing, Michael decided to expand his social projects. He opened 2 more technical schools in underserved neighborhoods of New York City and created a scholarship fund for talented young people. Michael, Sarah said, watching her husband devote more and more time to these projects, are you trying to cope with your grief by staying busy? Maybe, Michael admitted. But I'm also trying to honor my mother's memory by doing what she would have done. And what would she have done? Helped people in need, that's what she always did. Then keep going, but don't forget to take care of yourself too. I have you to take care of me, Michael said, hugging his wife. And you always will. At 50, Michael decided to throw a big party to celebrate half a century of life, not out of vanity, but because he wanted to gather all the important people who had been part of his journey. The party was held in the hall of the first technical school he'd founded. Hundreds attended, former students, company employees, decades-long friends, and his entire family. In his speech, Michael spoke about gratitude. 50 years of life have taught me that happiness isn't in the things we accumulate, but in the people we choose to share our journey with, he said. Looking at all of you here today, I see a family that goes far beyond blood ties. I see friends who became brothers, students who became inspirations, employees who became partners. Thank you to everyone who has been part of my story. You've made my life truly rich. Among the guests was Tyler, the former technical school student who was now a graduate engineer working at Thompson Logistics. Mr. Michael, Tyler said, I have a surprise for you. What surprise? Tyler presented an expansion plan for the company that he had developed as a birthday gift. Tyler, this is incredible, said Michael, reviewing the plan. I learned from the best teacher, Tyler replied. You learned on your own. I just opened the doors. Jessica and Daniel Miller were also at the party. They had become parents to twins and were a happy, united couple. Michael, Jessica said, thank you for inviting us. You're part of this story, Michael replied. Your example as a family has been our inspiration, said Daniel. And you two are proof that true love changes people, Michael answered. At the end of the party, when only family remained, Michael gathered everyone for a special conversation. I want you all to know that everything I've built is yours, he told his children. But most of all, I want you to know that the greatest legacy I can leave you isn't money, it's values. What values, Dad? Asked Olivia, now 15. Honesty, hard work, respect for others, love for family, and the certainty that we can always make a difference in someone's life. Emma, now 35 and a mother of 2, was moved. Dad, those values are already planted in us, and we'll plant them in our children too. Ethan and Noah, both 25, were just starting their careers. Ethan had chosen to become a lawyer, working on social issues, while Noah had become an engineer and worked in the family business. Dad, Ethan said, I want you to know I chose my profession because of the example you set, always helping others. And I chose to work in the company because I want to continue the legacy you and Grandma Eleanor built, Noah added. Michael was touched by his children's words. You make me so proud, he said. Because you gave us the right example, Sarah replied. You raise children who know the value of what truly matters. That night, when they were alone in their room, Michael and Sarah talked about the future. Sarah, Michael asked, do you regret anything in our life? Not a thing, she answered. And you? Not a thing either. Every challenge we faced brought us here. And where is here? Here is exactly where I always wanted to be. Next to the person I love, with children I admire, making a difference in other people's lives. That's exactly where I want to be too. At 55, Michael received an unexpected offer. A group of businessmen wanted to buy Thompson Logistics for an astronomical sum. Michael, said the consultant handling the negotiation, this offer would make you one of the wealthiest men in the country. And why would I sell my family's company? Michael asked. For complete freedom. With this money, you'd never have to worry about anything again. Michael discussed the offer with his family. What do you all think? He asked. Dad, Noah said, the company is our history. Why would we sell our history? But it's a lot of money, Ethan countered. Money that could expand our social projects. That's true, Emma agreed. But it's also true that the company creates jobs and income for many families. Olivia, now 20 and studying business administration, gave her opinion. Daddy, I think the decision has to be yours. But remember what great-grandma Eleanor always said, that the company was a legacy for future generations. Sarah watched the conversation in silence. And what about you, honey? What do you think? Asked Michael. I think you already know the answer, said Sarah. The company isn't just a business, it's part of who we are. Michael thought about it for a few days and made his decision. I won't sell, he announced to the family. Why not? Asked Ethan. Because some things are priceless. The company represents everything my grandfather, my grandmother, and I built. It represents the jobs of hundreds of families. It's a legacy I want to leave for all of you. But what about the money for the social project? Asked Ethan. We'll find other ways to fund them, said Michael. The company can grow and generate even more resources to help people. Noah hugged his father. Dad, you made the right decision. I'm sure of it, said Michael. In the following years, Michael dedicated himself to preparing the next generation to take over the company. Noah showed a natural talent for management. Emma contributed with her experience in hospital administration. Ethan helped with legal matters, and even Olivia showed interest in the family business. Michael, said Sarah, watching her husband, teach their children about the company. You're building a dynasty. I'm building a family that knows how to work together, Michael corrected. It's the same thing. No, it's not. A dynasty is about power. A family is about love. At 60, Michael decided to semi-retire, passing the presidency of the company to Noah and staying on only as an advisor. Son, he said to Noah, the company is yours now. Ours, Dad. Our families. You're right. But the main responsibility is yours. I'll do my best. I know you will. You've been well prepared. At the handover celebration, Michael gave an emotional speech. Today isn't a farewell, but a continuation, he said. Thompson Logistics will remain a family-run ethical company committed to the well-being of its employees and customers. Noah represents the new generation with fresh ideas and renewed energy. But he also embodies the traditional values that have always guided our company. I'm certain that under his leadership, the company will reach even greater heights. Noah, moved, thanked his father for his trust. Dad, I promise to honor everything you and our family have built. Son, you already are. From the first day you chose to work with us. With more free time, Michael deepened his commitment to social projects. The technical schools had already trained thousands of young people, many of whom found jobs at Thompson Logistics itself. Michael, said Robert, now the director of the entire technical school network, you've created a virtuous cycle. How so? The young people we train get jobs at your company, which grows and hires more people, who in turn can send their children to our schools. That's exactly what I wanted, said Michael, to create opportunities that last. At 65, Michael became a grandfather for the first time. Emma had a baby girl named Eleanor, after her great-grandmother. Grandpa Michael, little Eleanor, now 5, asked during a visit, "Why do you work so much?" "Because I want to leave a better world for you and your cousins," Michael answered. "And will you?" "With the help of people like you, yes." "Can I help?" "Of course you can, sweetheart. When you grow up, you can carry on what we're building." Sarah watched Michael playing with their granddaughter and smiled. "You're such a doting grandfather," she said. "And I'll be even more doting when our other children give us grandchildren too," said Michael. "Ethan is engaged. Soon, we'll have more grandchildren. And Noah is in a serious relationship. And Olivia is preparing to take on a bigger role in the company. Our family keeps growing," said Michael, pleased. "And it stays united," added Sarah. At 70 years old, Michael decided to write a book telling his story, not out of vanity, but because he wanted to document the lessons he'd learned throughout his life. The book was titled The True Value and recounted everything from his humble childhood to building his business and family legacy. "Michael," said the editor, "this story will inspire so many people." "I hope so," Michael replied, "especially young people who think they don't have opportunities. Your story proves it's possible to succeed in life while holding on to your values." "It's not about success," Michael corrected. "It's about being happy while making a difference." The book became a bestseller, and Michael donated all the profits to his technical schools. During the launch events, he always spoke about the importance of family and values. "The greatest wealth I can leave my children and grandchildren isn't the businesses or the money," he'd say. "It's the values that allow them to build a purposeful life." At 75, Michael was invited to give a lecture at a university. The topic was ethics in business. "Young people," he told a packed auditorium, "you'll face many temptations in your careers. You'll be pressured to take shortcuts, to compromise principles for profit. My advice? Resist. Success built on ethics is the only kind that brings lasting happiness. Money is important, yes, but it's just a tool. What matters is how we use that tool to improve our lives and others." After the lecture, a young student approached him. "Mr. Michael, how can we be sure we're making the right decisions?" "Ask yourself, would this decision make me proud if my family knew? If the answer is yes, it's probably the right choice. And if it's no, then find another path, one that lets you hold your head high." The following year, Michael was honored by New York City's mayor for his contributions to education and social development. "Mr. Michael," the mayor said during the ceremony, "your technical schools have transformed thousands of young lives." "Mr. Mayor, those young people transformed their own lives. We just gave them opportunities. Even so, your contribution is immeasurable. It's a moral duty for those who've had opportunities to create them for others." At the post-ceremony celebration, Michael was surrounded by family. All his children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren were there. "Grandpa," said Eleanor, now 15, "you're famous." "No, my dear. I'm just a man lucky enough to be loved by wonderful people." "And who knew how to return that love?" Sarah added. "Especially to you," Michael said, kissing his wife. By 80, Michael was physically frailer but still sharp-minded. He spent his days talking with family, welcoming visits from former students, and watching his business and social projects thrive. "Michael," said Noah, now a seasoned 45-year-old entrepreneur, "the company has never been stronger. And neither have the schools," added Robert, as dedicated as ever to education. "That makes me very happy," Michael said. "It means what we built has a life of its own." "Because it was built on a solid foundation," said Ethan, now a renowned lawyer specializing in social rights. Olivia, who'd become the company's vice president, shared news. "Dad, we just signed a contract to build our 5th technical school." "Where will it be?" "In the neighborhood where you grew up, a full circle," Michael said, moved. "Perfect. That's where it all began." Emma, now the director of a public hospital, also had news. "Dad, we're implementing a paid internship program for graduates from our schools in hospital maintenance." "More and more opportunities," Michael said, pleased. "That's how it works," said Sarah. "One good deed leads to others." On the eve of his 81st birthday, Michael gathered the whole family for a special conversation. "I want you all to know I've had a full and happy life," he said. "Every day with you has been a gift." "Dad, we still have plenty of time together," Emma said. "Maybe yes, maybe no," Michael replied. "But what matters is that we made the most of the time we've had, and that we built something that will last forever," Noah added. "Not just the company or the schools," Michael said, "but the values, the love, the family bond. Those are the real treasures," Ethan agreed. Olivia stepped closer to her father. "Dad, thank you for being the best example a daughter could have. Thank you for being the best children a father could ask for." Eleanor, the eldest granddaughter, now 21 and studying to be a teacher, spoke for all the grandchildren. "Grandpa, you taught us that success isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by the good we do. And you're all living that lesson in your own lives," Michael said proudly. Sarah, now 78, was still his loving and faithful companion. "Michael," she said, "in these more than 40 years together, you've exceeded every expectation I had for our life." Because you were by my side every step of the way, he replied, and I will be until my last day. I know, and that gives me peace. On the morning of his 81st birthday, Michael woke feeling especially grateful. He looked at Sarah sleeping beside him and thought of the journey they'd shared. He got up slowly and went to the window. From the bedroom, he could see the garden where the grandchildren used to play, and in the distance the bustle of the city he loved so much. His thoughts turned to Jessica, the woman who had rejected him decades ago. Ironically, he felt grateful to her. If she hadn't turned him down, he would never have met Sarah, never built the family he had, never discovered the true meaning of happiness. He thought of Eleanor, his grandmother, who had passed nearly 2 decades ago, but whose legacy lived on in every decision he made. He thought of Mrs. Ruth, his mother, who had instilled in him the values that guided his life. He thought of Robert, the loyal friend still working beside him after more than 50 years. And he thought of the family he had built, a wife who loved him unconditionally, children who had grown into good and successful people, grandchildren and great-grandchildren who would carry on the family legacy. When Sarah woke, she found Michael still at the window. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking I've been the luckiest man in the world," he answered. "Why?" "Because I've learned that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in who we love and who loves us." Sarah moved closer to him. "And you are deeply loved, by you most of all, and by all the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, friends, former students. You've touched so many lives, Michael, and every one of them has touched mine too." That afternoon, during the birthday celebration, Michael was surrounded by over 200 people, family, friends, former employees, graduates from the technical schools, fellow business leaders, all gathered to celebrate a life dedicated to good. Tyler, the former student who now directed one of the company's divisions, gave a heartfelt speech. "Mr. Michael," he said, "you taught me that it doesn't matter where we come from but where we're going. You gave me opportunities that changed not just my life but my entire family's life." "Tyler," Michael replied, "you always had the potential. I just opened a few doors. And those open doors make all the difference in a person's life." A longtime employee from the company's early days also spoke. "Mr. Michael, I worked with you for 30 years. I saw the company grow, but more than that, I saw how you never changed at your core. You were always the same humble and fair man." "Because I learned that the position doesn't change the person," Michael answered. "The person brings dignity to the position." Jessica, now 70 and accompanied by her husband and children, was also present. "Michael," she said, stepping closer to him, "thank you for teaching me about true love. Jessica, you found your path, that's what matters. And you found yours long ago. Congratulations on these 81 well-lived years. Thank you. And congratulations on building a beautiful family with Daniel." At the end of the party, when only the closest family remained, Michael asked to speak one last time. "I want you all to remember one thing," he said. "Money can run out, businesses can fail, but the love of a united family is eternal." "Dad," said Noah, "you gave us so much more than money. You gave us examples, values, direction. And above all, love," added Emma. "Love that we'll pass on to our children," said Ethan. "And to our children's children," Olivia finished. Sarah held her husband's hand. "Michael, you've fulfilled your mission in life." "What mission?" "To make a difference. To leave the world better than you found it." "Did I manage that?" "Look around you," Sarah said. "Look at your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Look at the thousands of people who've benefited from your schools. Look at the employees who supported their families working for your company. You've touched thousands of lives." Michael smiled, feeling fulfilled. "Then I can say, I've lived a good life." "The best life possible," Sarah agreed. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your honest thoughts in the comments. Do you think Michael made the right decisions throughout his journey? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like and most importantly subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartfelt stories.